My name is Tina Thomas and I'll be talking to you today about using storytelling throughout the consumer decision journey within the niche but lucrative world of extreme sports, in particular the Ironman triathlon. And I'll be looking at it from an autoethnographic perspective. The McKinsey Consumer Decision Journey model will be used to frame this research, but due to time constraints, the first two stages will be combined and discussed in unison. Storytelling has been pertinent to my extreme sports journey and beyond. Before becoming involved in triathlon, I'd never heard of Ironman, let alone wanted to try one. But as I got fitter and more experienced in the sport, I was greatly inspired by the stories of fellow endurance athletes. An Ironman is an ultra-endurance triathlon consisting of 3 separate disciplines and is considered extreme because the activities are inherently challenging and exacerbated by the lack of control over weather conditions or the natural environment. A sobering definition of extreme sports is when a mismanaged mistake or accident would most likely result in death, which is entirely possible and sadly has become the reality for some athletes. Let me put extreme sports into context from a consumer behaviour perspective. As extreme sports are typically experiential, the links between the growth of this sector and the recent social change towards an experience economy should be considered. Research suggests the experience economy has arisen following an abundance of undifferentiated goods and services which no longer foster economic growth. And for businesses to be successful in adapting to this new climate, competitive advantage should be pursued through the creation and supply of experiences that add value. The experiential nature of my consumer choices will become apparent. However, I must highlight the role consumption of associated products and services play in my pursuit of experiences. I purchase many related products and services, such as sports massage, a lighter, faster bike, kit that doesn't chafe and helps me to look the part, but all of which are used particularly to support the end goal of enriching the experience of the event I've signed up for. So given the consumer experience can be seen to be as, if not more important than the products and services consumed, the following narratives will aim to highlight how stories impact the purchasing decisions of extreme sports consumers. Extreme sports are inherently dangerous, so they may be regarded as reckless or impulsive. However, research suggests this is not necessarily the case, and much needed commitment and high skill levels, developed over a long time, provide some mitigation for the extreme nature of the sport. And in fact, from a business perspective, what is required is a carefully staged scenario which produces just the right balance between challenge and comfort in order to allow a certain kind of experience to become possible. This is especially true in my case, as listening to the stories of others greatly inspired me, and it allowed me to consider and select races that were within my reach. I wanted the challenge, but I didn't want to fail. Austria is well known as a great race for first-timers, and from the stories I'd heard, it had everything I was looking for. The quality of the Ironman race experience, along with the razzmatazz finish lines, which were then compared with the stories of some damp squibs of other branded and non-branded races. I didn't want to commit a year of my life to training for the end of the race to be a disappointment, so I chose Ironman based on these stories. The risks extreme sports pose and the likelihood of suffering are a fundamental aspect of the experience. Living to tell the tale adds to the enjoyment of participating in extreme sports, and the ability to do this has been shown to be equally as important as the experience itself. This highlights the initial consideration of which events to sign up for based on the ability of the athlete to have a good story to tell post-race, and this can be seen in the following examples. An ultra-endurance athlete suggested stories about Ironman Wales being one of the hardest but best supported races had directly influenced registration for the event, and the ability to tell the tale of this race afterwards greatly appealed to him, and was one of the key reasons for considering this race. This is echoed by another athlete who told me that the recounting of an event by his social groups made an impact on his consumer decision making, either from tales of how awesome it was, or quite the opposite, how awfully hard it was. And he stated this: "It was always a regret of mine that I didn't get into Norseman. The thought of the journey out in the ferry and jumping off into the cold dark waters always excited me. Then heading to the shore, guided only by the light of a bonfire." This description is not from the Norseman website, but from stories of others who have lived to tell the tale. This demonstrates the power of story. How a previous story has influenced this athlete to consider a legendary race, which has now become part of his own story of regret. Now, let's think about the closure phase. In combination with other factors, stories help to bring about closure. The recounted stories of others' experiences influence my choice of brand and associated location. After every race entry, there's a flurry of storytelling, usually with those who influence my choice of race in the first place. How I played a game of fastest finger first, frantically clicking refresh over and over until the race link opened, and finally getting my slot. Feeling triumphant when I realised I'm in, swiftly followed by a feeling of, oh heck, what have I just done? However, being able to get to that point of closure is also dependent upon a number of factors for me, not least my current physical condition, or whether I can get myself in decent shape, whether the course suits my skill set, I'm more comfortable in lakes than I am in the sea, and also whether a race meets my epic criteria. I want a story of my own to tell at the end of this. Given that an event is intangible and typically signed up for a year in advance, stories are vitally important to help me visualise what I'll be getting for my money at the end of it. They help me basically press the button to register and make that closure. Vivid recollections of others' experiences serve me better than an event information page, which, although useful and can be supported by inspiring images, is a more factual representation of what I'll be getting for my money. During the closure stage, stories help me consider and select appropriate races, and my closure decision has become easier the more experienced in the sport I become. This might be because the barriers to entry are lower, as I already own the required products and can source appropriate services. This is important to consider, as this may not be the case for other athletes, and as such these factors may also have an impact on the propensity for them to sign up for events, regardless of the stories they're subjected to. But this does require further research. The post-purchase stage appears to be where influence from listening to other stories changes to influencing others with my own stories. Travelling to participate in extreme sports can be considered sports tourism. Extreme sports have become significant income generators in this sector, so understanding what influences an athlete towards a particular brand, event, location is key. Sports tourism not only involves athletes travelling to compete, but also the supporters and spectators of these experiences. As you can see, they've been brought together in this definition. This definition highlights many facets of my experiences of extreme sports and the co-constructed nature of these experiences. The success of an event is dependent upon many different participants coming together to create an experience the event organisers could not create in isolation. Each event is dependent upon the co-creation of the experience by the company and its network, the consumer, but also the consumer community. My first full distance race in Austria was an extraordinarily positive experience, entirely influenced by fellow athletes recounting their experiences of the race. I won't engulf you with the myriad of stories from my typical 15.5 hours on course, but I do want to share with you the everlasting impression of the experience that I came away with. The finish line was like nothing I'd ever experienced, grandstands filled with thousands of supporters, and the atmosphere was incredible. This experience was pivotal for me and ignited my love affair with the sport. This might be because I'm a back-of-the-pack athlete, and the quality of the finish line experience is of vital importance to me. There is a lot of pain and suffering experienced during a race, especially when it gets dark and your body is completely exhausted. But when you approach the finish line, everything changes. You can actually feel the energy crackling in the air around you. The music vibrates through every part of your body. The crowds are cheering and clapping, the cheerleaders are dancing around you, and the announcers then telling you you've made it. This is when the euphoria kicks in. This is what makes it all worth it. Now, let's compare that with a contrasting experience of another Ironman finish line. It was an inaugural race in Finland, and unfortunately the whole experience was a complete letdown. Such little support on course and a damp squib of a finish line with no more than 20 people, and an announcer trying to rouse what little energy there was. So, no matter how well organised the race is by Ironman, the company still needs the support of other participants to add value to the experience. For me, the finish line is where I usually experience added value, which is paying its way forward for some races, as I recount my positive experiences to others. But for those that don't meet the expectations, these are also reflected in my stories, which have since discouraged other people from signing up. These examples are important from a business perspective, as the nature of the recounted story, whether positive or negative, arises directly from the experience of the athlete at the event. And so, understanding and delivering the aspects of an experience that are most important to both the athletes and their supporters might positively impact the resultant stories that will inevitably be retold for many years to come. In conclusion, stories are inherently part of the extreme sports world, whether through influencing others or being influenced by others. Therefore, it's essential to focus on creating inspiring, co-created experiences for consumers. In addition, by identifying common themes in the stories being told within a particular target market throughout the consumer decision journey, but also understanding the influences these stories have, this may then help extreme sports companies provide additional value-added aspects of the sports tourism experiences these consumers are seeking. Thank you.